Have you ever walked alone through a city at night and felt that someone was following you? Not the quick footsteps of a passerby, but the slow, deliberate steps of something that doesn't want to be seen. That's how my night began in New York City. The streets were slick from an evening rain, their cracked asphalt glistening under dim yellow street lamps. It was 2:13 a.m., and even though New York is called the city that never sleeps, this part of the city was silent, unnaturally silent. Earlier that week, I had found something strange in my apartment. My place was on the 4th floor of a worn-out brick building in Manhattan, the kind of place where the paint peels from the walls and the radiators hiss like they're angry at you. I'd been there for 2 months, trying to get my life back together after a breakup, but on Tuesday night, I discovered something that made my heart sink. I dropped my phone between the bed and the wall, and when I reached down to get it, my fingers touched something rough. An envelope. It was wedged deep between the floorboards. The paper felt brittle, almost like it would disintegrate in my hands. On the front, scrawled in jagged, shaky handwriting, were 3 words: "Do not open." That was it. No address, no name. I should have left it alone. I should have shoved it back under the floorboards and forgotten it was ever there. But curiosity has always been my weakness. I tore it open. Inside was a black and white photograph. The edges were curled and the surface was grainy with age. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, just a street scene, but something about the shadows didn't look right. They were too deep, too thick, as if they didn't belong in the daylight at all. And then I saw it. The building. It was a narrow, crumbling brownstone wedged between 2 taller, newer structures. The windows were dark, except for one, a single lit window on the top floor, and in that window was a face. It wasn't looking out. It wasn't even facing the camera. No, it was pressed against the glass, distorted, pale, and too long to be human. Its mouth was slightly open, and its eyes were too wide, like someone had stretched them from the inside. I was still staring at the photograph when I noticed writing in the bottom corner, smudged ink, words that made my chest tighten. "If you find this, run." That's when I heard it. A sound from my bedroom. Not footsteps, not movement, a whisper. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it said my name, slowly, deliberately, like it wanted to see how my heart would react to hearing it. I froze. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchen, and a living room. The bedroom door was open. There was no one else there. At least, there shouldn't have been. The whisper came again, this time closer. My skin prickled, my mouth went dry. I forced myself to stand and step toward the doorway. The light from the living room spilled faintly into the bedroom, just enough to show me the edge of the bed and the window beyond. Something moved in the reflection of the glass. I told myself it was just my own shadow, but it wasn't moving when I did. It stood there, tall and thin, head tilted in an unnatural angle, and then it smiled. The photograph wouldn't leave my mind. That distorted face, those words. By morning, I had convinced myself it had to be a prank, some twisted joke left behind by a previous tenant, but the whisper from the night before kept echoing in my head. I told myself I'd imagined it, until I found the second envelope. It was lying on my kitchen counter when I woke up. I hadn't put it there. Same brittle paper, same jagged handwriting, no stamp, no seal, just sitting there as if someone had placed it while I slept. My stomach twisted when I read the words on the front. "You looked." Inside was another photograph. This one was closer, taken from the same street, But now the camera was pointed directly at that single lit window. The face was still there, closer to the glass. The details were sharper now. The stretched skin, the hollow cheeks, the almost translucent flesh. Its mouth was wider this time, and I could see what looked like teeth, too many of them. I needed answers. By noon I was in the public library, flipping through old property records and newspaper archives. I started with the street number on the back of the photograph. Most of the articles were about normal city life: elections, fires, business openings. But then I found it. An article from 1974. The headline read, "3 Dead in Unexplained Brownstone Tragedy." The story was short but unnerving. 3 tenants were found in their apartments, their bodies pale, eyes wide open, as if frozen in terror. No signs of forced entry, no physical injuries. The police report described the cause of death as unknown. The building was closed down, but a note at the bottom mentioned it was quietly reopened in the late 80s. No official reason given. I felt someone standing behind me. I turned, but the aisle was empty. That night I took the subway to the address from the photograph. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Streetlights flickered as I walked. The brownstone looked even worse in person. Bricks crumbling, paint peeling, windows dark, except for one top floor. The same lit window. I stood across the street for a long time, staring up at it, trying to convince myself it was just some insomniac with a weird taste in decor. But then, the curtain shifted. Something pale moved behind the glass. A sudden chill crept up my spine. My breath turned to mist in the summer air. That's when I noticed something wrong. The street around me had gone completely silent. No cars, no footsteps, not even the distant hum of traffic. And then, the whisper came again, right next to my ear. My body went cold. The whisper hadn't come from across the street. It hadn't come from above me. It was right there at my ear. I spun around. The sidewalk was empty. The street was empty. Every window in the surrounding buildings was dark. My pulse was hammering so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. Then I saw the brownstone's front door slowly creaking open. It was like the building itself was inviting me in. The faint glow from the top floor window spilled down the staircase inside, just enough to illuminate the first few steps. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, just enough to prove there was nothing there. Then get out. The moment I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something metallic, like old coins. The door shut behind me on its own. The hallway was narrow, with peeling wallpaper that had bubbled and cracked over the years. Every floorboard groaned under my weight. I passed door after door, each one closed tight. No voices, no movement, just that same heavy silence. Halfway up the stairs, I heard it again, the whisper. This time it wasn't my name. It was a laugh, a soft, breathless chuckle, as if someone was inches away, finding my fear amusing. I froze on the landing. The walls felt closer now, the air thicker. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something move in the shadows near the ceiling. Something long and thin, gliding just out of the light. The next staircase was steeper. My hands shook as I gripped the railing. The wood felt damp. No, not damp, wet. When I looked down, my palm was smeared with something dark. I didn't want to believe it was blood. By the time I reached the top floor, the light from the single window was spilling into the hallway. The door to the apartment was slightly open. Inside, the glow came from an old-fashioned oil lamp, sitting on the floor. No furniture, no curtains, just bare walls and that lamp. And then, I saw the corner. Something stood there, tall, thin, its skin stretched tight over its bone. Its head was bent at an unnatural angle, almost touching its own shoulder. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, but its eyes, they were locked on me. A slow smile spread across its face, too wide for a human mouth. And then, without moving its legs, it was suddenly closer. It was only a few feet away now. I hadn't seen it move. One moment it had been standing in the corner. The next, it was right in front of me. Its face was worse up close. The skin looked almost wet, like it had been pulled from deep water. The eyes weren't just wide, they were hollow, yet somehow still staring straight into me. And the smile, it kept stretching. The skin at the corners of its mouth, splitting silently. No blood, just pale flesh tearing like old paper. I stepped back, my heel hitting the doorway. The air between us felt heavier, pressing against my chest. The thing tilted its head slowly, as if it was studying me. Then, it whispered something, 3 words that made my stomach turn. "You shouldn't look." The lamp's flame flickered violently, casting its shadow across the wall, except the shadow didn't match its movements. While the thing stood perfectly still, its shadow began to crawl toward me, stretching across the floor, like liquid darkness. I turned to run. The hallway was longer than before, impossibly long, the peeling wallpaper seeming to pulse with each heartbeat in my ears. I could hear it following, not footsteps, not breathing, but a scraping sound, like nails dragging along the inside of the walls. The stairwell should have been right there. Instead, the hallway twisted, curving into a sharp angle that I knew hadn't been there when I came in. Doors lined each side now, all slightly open, just enough for me to see the blackness inside. From one of the rooms, something pale darted out, long fingers, far too many joints, grasping at my arm. I yanked free, and ran, my own breath loud in my ears. I turned another corner, and there it was, the front door, wide open, the night air spilling in. Relief surged through me, but when I stepped forward, I realized the doorway didn't lead outside anymore. It was just more hallway. I spun around. The thing was at the far end, motionless again. Only now, there were 2 of them, both smiling, both whispering my name. They stood at the far end of the hallway, perfectly still, their heads tilted at the same impossible angle, both smiling, both whispering my name in a slow, broken unison that made my skin crawl. I stepped back, but the floor beneath me felt softer now, like I was standing on damp soil instead of wood. The smell hit me, rot, thick, and sweet, the kind that clings to the back of your throat. My eyes watered as I realized the wallpaper wasn't peeling, it was moving. Small pale shapes were crawling just under the surface, their outlines pressing against the paper like trapped insects. Something scratched from the inside, and I saw the faint impression of a face, open mouth, hollow eyes, before it slid back into the wall. The 2 figures didn't move, but the whispers grew louder, overlapping, as if dozens of unseen voices had joined in. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head now. "You found us, now you stay." The hallway seemed to stretch and breathe, its walls slowly leaning inward. I turned and ran, slamming open the nearest door. The room beyond was tiny, barely large enough for a bed, and on that bed was another photograph. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was me, standing in the hallway, taken from behind. The air grew colder. I looked up, and in the reflection of the cracked mirror on the wall, I saw them, not 2 now, but figures, lining the walls of the room, their faces blurred as if they were vibrating in place, their smiles splitting wider and wider, until they were nothing but gaping maws. The light from the hallway died, replaced by a dim, sickly glow from above. I looked up just in time to see a pale hand, long skeletal fingers, slide down from the ceiling toward my face. I stumbled back into the hallway, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The door slammed shut behind me, but the whispers didn't fade. They were following me, crawling through the walls, keeping pace, no matter how fast I moved. When I reached the staircase again, it was gone. In its place was another hallway, this one lined entirely with mirrors. In every reflection, I was alone, except, in each one something stood just behind me. I stepped into the hallway of mirrors, my breath fogging the glass. Each pane reflected my trembling figure, but the air felt heavier here, like the hallway was holding its breath.
I took a cautious step forward. In the mirror to my left, my reflection didn't move. It just stood there watching me, with wide, unblinking eyes. I froze, turned to look directly at the glass. The me inside smiled, slowly, and then it lifted a hand and placed it flat against the inside of the mirror. I didn't move, but all around me, the other reflections began to do the same. Every version of me, pressing their hands to the glass, smiling that unnatural smile. The sound of fingernails scraping against the inside of the mirrors filled the hallway, like hundreds of tiny claws dragging on ice. Then, one by one, my reflections started to change. Their eyes hollowed out, their skin turned pale, and stretched tight over their bones, until I was looking at dozens of copies of the same thing I'd seen in the photographs. The whispers returned, but now they weren't calling my name. They were telling me something, over and over, in a voice like dead leaves rustling. They never leave. The glass in the mirrors began to ripple, like the surface of a black pond. One of the reflections stepped forward, its body pushing through the glass, as if it were liquid. Its foot touched the floor with a wet sound, and it began walking toward me. I turned and ran. The hallway twisted again, but this time it didn't feel random. I realized every turn, every shift in the walls, it was guiding me deeper. The building wasn't trapping me by accident, it was leading me somewhere. I burst through another door, and found myself in a room that smelled of dust and mildew. In the center was a table covered in photographs, hundreds of them. My hands shook as I picked them up. Every face was different, different people, different year, all standing in the same hallway I had just run through, and in every single one, the pale figure stood behind them. One of the photos was dated over 100 years ago, another was dated last week. I felt eyes on me. Slowly I turned. They were all here. The people from the photograph, dozens of them, standing in the corners, in the doorway, filling the room, without a sound. Their eyes were gone, just empty, black hollows. Their mouths hung open as if mid-scream, but no sound came out. The tallest figure stepped forward, its face splitting into that impossible smile. It leaned close, until its breath was cold against my cheek, and whispered, "Now, you're one of us." I staggered back, my shoulders hitting the cold wall. The crowd of hollow-eyed figures closed in, their steps slow, but synchronized, like they were moving to some silent rhythm only they could hear. My chest tightened with panic. I had to get out. I shoved past them, expecting to feel flesh or bone, but my hands went straight through. They were cold, like moving through a pocket of winter air. The touch left a numbness crawling up my arms. The hallway beyond the room was darker now, the walls damp and breathing in shallow pulses. Somewhere, far ahead, I saw a faint light, an open door, the exit. I ran for it, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. Behind me, the whispers rose, hundreds of voices overlapping, speaking words I couldn't understand. They grew faster, louder. The air thickened, until every breath burned my lungs. I burst through the door, and found myself outside. The night air was sharp and cold, but it was real. The brownstone stood behind me, its windows dark. For a moment, I thought I'd made it. Then I noticed the street. It was empty. No cars, no people, no sound. And the skyline. It wasn't New York anymore. The buildings were wrong, too tall, leaning at impossible angles, their windows like black, staring eyes. My relief turned to ice. I stepped backward, and my heel clicked against something on the ground. I looked down. A photograph. It was me, standing right where I was now, looking over my shoulder. In the photograph, behind me, the brownstone's top window was lit, and in that window was me. Not the me holding the photograph, the me with pale skin, hollow eyes and a smile that split my face too wide. I dropped the picture. My breathing was ragged. I turned to run, but the street stretched endlessly in both directions, vanishing into darkness. Somewhere behind me, the brownstone's door creaked open again, and a voice I now recognized as my own whispered from the shadows, "You never left." It's strange, the way time works here. There's no sunrise, no sunset, just an endless night, heavy and cold, draped over everything like a shroud. I don't remember the moment I stopped trying to escape. At first, I ran, I screamed, I banged on every door I could find, but the streets twist, the buildings shift, and sooner or later, you end up back where you started, standing in front of the brownstone, with that single lit window. I don't feel hunger anymore, or thirst. I don't sleep. I just exist. Sometimes, I hear the other. They drift through the streets, their whispers threading through the darkness, like faint music. Some have been here for decades, some for centuries. They all sound the same now, slow, empty, resigned. I've seen new ones arrive. They stumble in just like I did, confused, terrified, clutching photographs they don't remember picking up. They run at first, thinking there's a way out. I used to watch, from the shadows, silently willing them to make it, but they never do. And somewhere along the way, I stopped hoping they would. Now I wait. I stand in the top floor window, the pale light spilling over my face. I watch the streets below. I wait for the sound of footsteps in the silence. I wait for the door to open. When they see me, their faces change. I know what they're thinking. Who is that? Why is he watching me? They don't know yet, but they will. When they open the first envelope, when they hear the first whisper, when they take their first step inside, I'll be waiting in the corner, and I'll smile, because the secret of this place isn't that it keeps you awake, it's that, sooner or later, it becomes your home, forever.